So when I first got to Australia, so this was right after having gastric bypass surgery, I hired my first personal trainer. So that would have been in 2012, once I was healed from my surgery. And we worked together for about a year and a half. And then I transitioned into doing workouts in my own at the gym, eventually moving into more of a home garage gym. Hello, friends, and welcome to a solo podcast today. I thought it would be fun to share my story so far because there's such a diverse group of people that are following me through social media or just in my world, and not any one group has the whole story, I think. So, for example, I've got people here from my earliest days in elementary school, from kindergarten, some dear friends, people from my days in university or high school, at different school for respiratory therapy, like different things. And then my work in the respiratory world. And then I became a personal trainer. So it's just been this really interesting circle, I call it. So I thought it would be fun to share some of that story with you. So for a really long time, I've kind of contemplated what to call myself, like what title to use to describe what I do. To be honest, even when I was a respiratory therapist, not many people really knew what that meant. And that's okay. I've always been kind of on the fringes, I guess, in that healthcare world. So part of it too is I have this visceral reaction to the word coach. For whatever reason, I think there's just some baggage attached to that. So some time ago, I was having a conversation with a client. We were doing a personal training session. We've been working together for years, and she was quite sick. So we were having a conversation about some things that were going on. We just lots of things. And at one point she said to me, she goes, "So are you telling me this as my respiratory therapist, my personal trainer?" And I just said to her, I said, I can't separate these pieces of me, whether I'm retired or still practicing or whatever it is, and then throw on many, many, many years of experience and knowing some of my clients very well. You just can't separate it. So here's how I'm kind of using these words to describe what I do now. I'm calling myself an integrative functional health therapist, which is a lot of words, and I'm going to break it down a little bit. So functional medicine is a systems biology-based approach that focuses on identifying and addressing the root cause of disease. We think of every symptom or differential diagnosis, maybe one of many contributing things to an individual state of illness. Integrative medicine is another piece in that it combines aspects of traditional Western medicine with more holistic medicine practices to then create a very personalized treatment option for clients. I always call clients friends. It's one other thing I've struggled with over the years, from patients and clients and friends, and now it's usually just friends. So for me, this integrative medicine piece also includes pathways to integrate lifestyle choices or habits into your routines. I think that is often the missing piece. So you can go to a functional medicine doctor, an integrative medicine doctor, and that's fabulous. And then it's this next piece of how do you then integrate all of that into your life? And I think that's somewhere that I can help. The therapist side is as a healthcare professional trained in methods of treatment and rehabilitation other than drugs or surgery. I do even have training in drug administration as well too. But it's not something I do a whole lot of anymore. So here we are. Story of how we've got here so far. So many of my earliest memories include standing at my chalkboard easel in my neighbor's garage and teaching my younger brother what I'd learned at school that day. So think it was kindergarten, grade 1. I was 4 or 5 years old. He's 2 years younger than me, and he was soaking up every lesson I had to share with him. So needless to say, he was a little ahead of his little friends when he started school a couple years after me. And then even from there, I have all these other memories around school from this book that my grandmother gave to myself and to all of my brothers and my cousins. And it was this, it was very large, kind of like legal size papers, quite large. It had like a couple of pockets for every grade. So from kindergarten right through all of elementary school, through high school, even went on to the university and college and things like that. So you could have your little headshot picture. Remember we used to get pictures? I don't even know if they still do that anymore. I don't have kids, so you could write down things like, you could stuff those envelopes with awards and pictures or things from the school year. You could do all kinds of things. And one of the things that was in there, I remember this from the very younger years, there was these boxes you could check about what do you want to be when you grow up? And there was a male list and a female list of professions. And you can imagine this would have been 1975. So what those things were, like fireman, nurse, doctor, whatever. I can't even remember all the different things. I would check them all off, and then I would write my own in there as well. Because I don't know, I just wanted to do all of the things. At that time, I used to love to sing and dance and read, and I moved around a lot. And then I progressed to playing the recorder, probably much to my parents' chagrin, and then the organ, and then the French horn. I kind of always went for the very noisy things. I got my first camera at 10. I fell in love with anything to do with horses around the same time and started to draw. I was a very creative kid, and that hasn't changed either. I'd like to just do lots of things like that, make things with my hands, all of the things. And then I had my first exposure to the idea of energy it was grade 7. It's funny how you remember certain things like that, right? Just when it was. I remember sitting in the classroom and the teacher standing at the chalkboard. It's kind of crazy. And he was teaching us probably principles of energy. And the idea at that point was he was telling us that energy cannot be destroyed, only change from one form into another. And then I had the following year, I had my first significant experience with death in my family. My uncle passed away in a car accident. He was only 28 years old. So I was 13 at the time. And I've shared this story in many places before, but I had this, I've always had this idea in my head about energy can't be destroyed, only change from one form into another. And I had this experience sitting, in the funeral during the ceremony, and I saw energy rising from the coffin up through the ceiling. So it was a very, very profound experience for someone at a very young age. From high school, that would have been the next year, was all about taking in every art class that my school offered and experimenting with things like drafting. I had my sights set on graphic design until something changed. I don't even remember what happened. It was probably an overall combination of a lot of different things, like things tend to be. But I somewhere along the line received the message that being an artist wasn't an actual career. And I guess I took that to heart. There was a lot of pressure about going to university versus college versus trades at that point. Again, we would have been talking, when did I finish high school? 1989? Yeah, around there. I think that's what it was. It's hard to remember these things sometimes. And I made this radical shift into sciences. So I found there was just so much pressure to decide, what you were going to be when you grew up. And I always found that very frustrating. Like I wanted to do, by this point, graphic design. I would have been a marine biologist. I thought about being a vet. And I was like, I didn't have the marks to get into university for that because it just wasn't my thing. And then I started going, what about medicine? So I decided to go pre-med when I started university, taking all the courses that I needed to make that change, and interjecting some other I shouldn't say more interesting courses, but it's a heavy load when you're taking a science degree. So I tried to, put some other, and it's also very you don't have a lot of electives. I think that was the word we used back then. So I was always trying to find these other interests that I could slide in there as well, because I didn't have a lot of freedom to add those kind of things into my schedule. I did really struggle to maintain my honor status during my third year because I kept getting sick. I was getting these recurrent ear infections, and my marks would slip every time I got sick. And there was, I think I was going to the doctor on campus, and there was just a lot of rounds of antibiotics. And long story short, I finally ended up getting my tonsils removed during the second semester. And then I needed to kind of start looking at options because it was just too much to keep that honor status. And I wasn't sure if med school was really where my heart really wanted to go. And then fortunately, how these things always happen, right? I had a teaching assistant in one of my classes. I don't remember what class it was, and it was my third year at university. And he told me about this school in Toronto for applied health sciences, yes. He was going to be going there the following year to do a program in nuclear medicine. And then at the same time, I also found out a really good friend of mine, his brother went to the same school we were at, and he was a year ahead. He was also going to the same school for X-ray technology. And I was like, maybe this is something that would be quite interesting. So I started to investigate that. Well, this is where I discovered this little known field of respiratory therapy, and I was absolutely hooked. I put all of my eggs into this one basket. I went to a school called the Michener Institute in Toronto, and there were other schools across the country that offered the program, but I was like, nope, this is where I'm going. And went through, it was a long process too. You had to be interviewed by a panel at the school. You had to spend some time in a local hospital before that as well with the respiratory department just to get a feel for what it was all about. I remember it being a very intimidating process in some ways, but it's also quite young. And it was, it was the best thing that probably ever could have happened to me. So university wasn't my jam, really, but this was. It was a very integrated approach where we weren't kept in the silos of our specific program. So you heard me talk about other programs there already, where nuclear medicine, X-ray technology, there was chiropody, there was all kinds of different things. And I don't know if they still do this, but when I was there, they had the first kind of semester, we were all together taking these core classes. So we got to really know each other quite well. It's also a very, very small school, so it's almost impossible now to get to know each other. But you could see it pay off down the road when you'd be working in a hospital and you'd know your colleagues in other departments, or you might even be going to have an MRI and you would know the tech that was doing it for you. So it was kind of fun in that sense. And it just really, I think, showed us this, that systems approach to things. And that's been very formative for me. I also loved it too because our instructors were actual respiratory therapists, that they were involved in the field. Many of them were still practicing. Some of them were pursuing advanced certification. So after you become a respiratory therapist, there's other things that you can do that are, just more advanced in neonatology and all kinds of different things, ECMO machines. And some of them were doing that. So it's interesting to see that. And you could see this career progression that was maybe available to you as well. And they were amazing. They did everything they could to prepare us for the emotional aspects of this work. It's very hard and overwhelming. Many days, I remember being told things like, you'll never forget the first person you take off life support, or the first child you treat, or the first delivery where you have to resuscitate a baby, and many, many other things. Because the things that I witnessed and experienced, even as a student, while I was training at a major downtown hospital, would make your head spin. Maybe those will be some stories for another day. I don't always share them with people that, maybe aren't all that interested in some maybe bloody and gory stories. So it wasn't really a tough market when I graduated. There wasn't a lot of full-time jobs available in the hospitals. So people were working 2 and 3 part-time casual positions, and that was great. I decided to go into the home healthcare environment instead. And again, doing things a little bit differently, so that we spent a year of our schooling in the hospital to learn a variety of different things. And of that, we would do various rotations through different types of places where respiratory therapists work. And 1 week of that was in home healthcare. And that's where I decided to go. So when I did such a variety of things. I worked there for 18 plus years. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a list of some of the things I did, because they're crazy stories, probably all on their own. So when I started, I was working in pulmonary function testing. And then I did maternity leave, where I was setting up patients or clients with obstructive sleep apnea equipment, or CPAP machines. Then I became a home care respiratory therapist, where I would go out to look after people in their homes. And then I did another maternity leave after that, where now I went into our head office and did a maternity leave around our national accreditation, which was that was probably one of my favorite jobs for a lot of different reasons. And then that moved into a full-time position in safety, quality, and regulatory, which then moved on into product management and all kinds of different things from there. So during that last little bit, I did see the need for getting some kind of business education. That's where I was kind of feeling called to, as I was kind of getting into this more, head office type of work and seeing all what was involved, and just felt like I needed some more training under my belt. So I was taking some courses at Sheridan College, and I think I was only taking like my second or third course, and it was a business writing course. And I tend to have, this happens to me quite often. So I had that teaching assistant back in university that pointed me down a road. And now I had an instructor here that pointed me down a road as well, taking this business writing course. And he just took me aside one evening after class and asked me why I was taking it. And I told him all these things that I've basically just, not all of these, but some of these things I just shared with you. And he was like, you can teach this course. Your skills are just beyond, because of your work experience. He suggested doing a master's in business administration, or an MBA. I didn't know that was an option available to me, because my undergraduate degree was not in that, it was in biology. But he was talking about just my work experience would probably be enough to do that. So I did pursue an MBA through the University of Phoenix online. Again, I'll date myself. They are one of the first schools to ever do degree programs online. I believe they started back in the 1970s. So when I was doing it, it was all like pre-social media. There was no online meeting platform. So it was very, very different than what that experience would be like today. So during all that time, I made a pretty significant transfer into working into sales and marketing, still all with the same company, and learning a lot around sleep and treatment and diagnostics. So taking kind of that home respiratory side with ventilation and all those different things, and taking it to this other side, which is now where this passion for sleep has come from. That took me also to Australia, where I spent years working for the Australian part of our company, because a company I was working for was a very large global company. So that's kind of like the education and work side. So I want to just kind of insert a little bit in here too, for those people that wouldn't know this part. So most of my adult life, I was obese as well. So I think at the highest, I weighed over 300 pounds. I had gastric bypass surgery in 2011, and I'm going to eventually, I don't know where I want to go with it yet, but I'm going to dedicate an entire podcast just to that topic, because it deserves its own conversation. So when I first got to Australia, so this was right after having gastric bypass surgery, I hired my first personal trainer. So that would have been in 2012, once I was healed from my surgery. And we worked together for about a year and a half. And then I transitioned into doing workouts in my own at the gym, eventually moving into more of a home garage gym. And life was moving along pretty nicely from the outside. I had this good career. I had gotten engaged. I was pretty healthy. And then I started getting sick. I ended up being severely anemic. I got an ulcer from the staples that were used in my surgery. Lots of stress going on at home as I found myself in the throes of a very unhealthy relationship with a narcissist. And again, I think that'll be another whole dedicated episode again. Ended up in the hospital for about a week, which eventually led to me losing my job after 18 plus years with this company. Maybe that'll be its own episode too. Who knows where we'll go with that one. And it eventually led to me returning to Canada, where I made another career change. So I decided to become a personal trainer, which led to me also taking on nutrition coaching because I quickly realized that that was a missing piece for me. Like I knew how to do these things for myself, but not necessarily so well for other people because my situation was very unique to having had weight loss surgery. The nutrition coaching was amazing because it turned me on to online training, which is still a love and passion for me. I rediscovered a love for kickboxing, which had started in Australia and brought that into the area that I was living at the time, which was phenomenal. I miss it so much. I miss doing kickboxing classes. From there, I took the kickboxing classes to a local private fitness facility, which eventually expanded into doing personal training there and group fitness classes of a variety of different things, boot camp, mums and kids classes, stretching classes, anything you can think of. I think I pretty much got my hands in it. And then we had COVID and I went back online, and eventually over the course of probably a year or so, I didn't remember now, I went back to just working for myself again too, and eventually left the gym. It gave me an opportunity to really start finding this marriage between all of my experiences in the respiratory world and home care and complex health issues and movement and nutrition and sleep. And it was I just realized that it's so impossible to separate all of that stuff out into pieces and package it inside a 30-minute training or, coaching session. So while we were, spending more time at home and doing all those things, I started spending a lot of time creating resources for all of those pieces involved in creating an environment where our body just absolutely thrives. It has been such a fun part to do these things and to see people responding to it that I share these things with. It's just been great. So more recently in the last year, I relocated to a new province in Canada. I'm still really doing a lot of work with my online relationships, which I love. I've dove into learning all kinds of things about botanical medicine, which it was funny. It started with a desire to make myself tea because I'm a big tea drinker, and it's grown into so much more than I even imagined. I think probably another episode as well. It allowed this experiences and experimentation and things like that's allowed me to get off medication for that ulcer I mentioned earlier. And I've been able to start helping people in new ways, again, supporting all of these lifestyle things that we want to integrate into our lives because it takes time and things change. And my plan at this point is I'm going to host a virtual open house next week. So you're all invited to drop by and chat about all of these things and anything related to health and wellness, ask questions. And it's part of the reason I wanted to record this pretty short episode just to give you an idea of where I've come from, where I kind of hope to be going, and if you want to come by and have a chat and learn about how any of these things might fit into your life or just to meet and have a catch up or whatever, come on by. So you'll find all the information. I'll put it in the notes here, and you'll find it on social media, all the places. So it's next Monday for a few hours in the afternoon. It'll be great to see you there and see what we can. It's not even about me trying to get you to become my client or anything like that. It's about, what could we do to shift the needle, shift the dial so that things are, I want you all to be the healthiest and best that you can be thriving in this world. And it's not necessarily by working with me. I know tons of other people as well. And I'm happy to share them and all of their expertise too, because together we can make some really good things happen. So until next time, I will hopefully see you next week at the online open house. And I'll be back again soon because I do have some more conversations coming soon with my friend Candace and all things ADHD. So we will see you then. Bye-bye.